So recently, I had a request to revisit perfectionism from a Buddhist perspective because it's so pervasive in our competitive culture. And, at its core, we've talked about it in the past, but at its core, it's a relentless pursuit of flawlessness. And it often comes accompanied by a critical self-evaluation, a fear of failure, a fear of being judged. I mean, it can really load us up. And it's really a personality style, a personality trait that plagues many of us, including myself. And this desire to excel is a good thing. I mean, it motivates us to grow, to achieve our goals, but then it tips into this thing where it becomes a source of tremendous suffering. It leads to anxiety, dissatisfaction, and most importantly for our purposes, an inability to appreciate the present moment. So from a Buddhist perspective, it fits right in with the teachings because it is a manifestation of clinging to unrealistic standards, craving for control, and both of which are big sources of suffering, as you know. So think about that. Perfectionism, it's always trying to have things perfect. We cling to that, and then we crave the control that we think will give us that perfection. But our path offers us a way of beginning to transcend this cycle, moving us toward acceptance, toward mindfulness, toward freedom from this rigid, tightly held grip of the need to be perfect. We know and we talk about it all the time here. Life is inherently impermanent, it is unsatisfactory, and it is devoid of a fixed, perfect self. The three marks of existence that the Buddha taught are central to understanding why perfectionism is ultimately futile, because it rests on the illusion that we can achieve a state of permanence that's perfect, whether that's a perfect performance, a flawless appearance, an ideal life, and on and on. And perfectionism assumes that if we work hard enough to control every variable in our lives, we can arrive at some magical state that's free of any flaws or any mistakes. And the problem is when we set that standard and then we encounter the inevitable flaws, we suffer greatly. Perfectionism assumes that if we work hard enough, we can overcome this reality of impermanence. But no matter how much effort we put in to perfecting something, particularly ourselves, it will inevitably change, or it will decay, or it will certainly fall short of our expectations. What if I spend hours trying to craft the perfect Dharma talk? I go over it again and again and again. And even if I believe that I finally achieved the perfect talk, this satisfaction is fleeting. Then I'm on to the next one. A new goal arises. Unforeseen circumstances render my efforts obsolete. I'm halfway through trying to create this perfect talk and I get a phone call or my dog needs to go out or whatever, and I can't create this perfect thing to bring to Sangha. So clinging to perfection creates this cycle of striving, creates this cycle of dissatisfaction. And the cycle is rooted in craving for things to be perfect, the second of the fourth noble truths, which always creates suffering. Perfectionism is also clearly tied to this concept of self, or what we call ego. The idea and this illusion that we have this fixed, independent self that can be perfected. And perfectionism feeds this illusion because it reinforces a belief that our worth, our value in life is tied to our achievements, to external validation. When we strive for perfection, we often do so out of a desire to prove our value to ourselves and others, to avoid criticism, or to maintain this particular fixed identity. But this is just another form of clinging. It's just another source of dukkha, of suffering. When we embrace perfectionism, we fear making mistakes because we think they reflect poorly on who we are. This image, this mask we wear. We have to be perfect behind the mask. So any failure, a failed project, a less than perfect appearance, a misstep in a relationship, we misspeak, a personal failing, any of these things are an experience of imperfection. And when we focus on those, this fixation creates this tremendous burden. Because we're always trying to protect the ego from harm, from criticism, or from judgment. But our path encourages us to let go of this attachment to protecting and aggrandizing the ego and recognize that it has very little to do with our true nature, because that is not a function of our outside achievements, nor is it a function of our failures. Mistakes and imperfections are simply part of the human experience, not reflections of an inherent flaw in our being. And think about the freedom that that gives us. We don't have to worry about keeping this mask always appearing perfect. We embrace what the Buddha called the middle way, a path of moderation that doesn't seek perfection. We find a balance between striving for excellence. Yes, we want to do well, but we accept imperfection. We don't think that doing well, doing things perfectly is the only acceptable outcome. So we employ right effort from the Noble Eightfold Path, which is not the same as perfectionism. Right effort involves cultivating wholesome qualities and letting go of unwholesome ones without attachment or obsession. Unwholesome ones like, I have to be perfect. This means setting intentions and working toward goals without being solely focused or consumed by the outcome. For example, a student, if I'm a student preparing for an exam, I study diligently, but I recognize that my worth is not dependent on getting an A+. When we focus on the process rather than the result, we engage fully in that process. We engage fully with our efforts without being paralyzed by the fear of failure. If we're so focused on the fear of failure, it's going to disrupt and destroy our process, our efforts, because we're looking ahead to the finished product, and it's not going to bring forth our most productive or creative selves. So we employ acceptance. This is a key aspect of overcoming, or at least lessening, our perfectionism. And we use our mindfulness to bring this to our awareness. Pay attention to the present moment with curiosity and non-judgment. When we're mindfully in the moment, we can really feel that perfectionism if it's nipping at our heels. When we are mindful, we observe our tendencies, our perfectionistic tendencies, but we let them go without being controlled by them. We notice this critical voice in our heads. We acknowledge it, but we don't take orders from it. We respond to it with compassion rather than harshness. Self-compassion is a powerful antidote to the harsh self-criticism that comes with perfectionism. Boy, if we perfectionists, we fail at something, boy, we are beating ourselves up, because the path teaches us that all beings, including ourselves, are worthy of kindness and understanding. When we make mistakes, when we fall short of our expectations, we choose to respond with the same compassion that we would respond to a dear friend. And this shift in perspective is transformative. I can tell you from my own experience. Instead of, and we learn to laugh at our mistakes. Instead of viewing them as failures, we treat them as opportunities for growth and learning. Instead of striving for this impossible ideal of perfection, we embrace our humanity and the humanity of others, flaws and all. And this approach not only reduces our suffering, but it fosters more authentic and compassionate relationships. At its root, perfectionism is often always about control. Control over ourselves, our environment, how others perceive us, how we present to the world. But this need for control is an illusion. The Buddha was very clear about that. So he asks us to let go of it, let go of that need for control. And it doesn't mean we give up or we don't try or we become passive. It means releasing our attachment to outcomes and trusting in the natural flow of life. And we do this through our meditation practice, through our study of the Dharma. We learn to observe our thoughts and feelings. We don't cling to them and we don't push them away. We just accept them as part of the flow of experience. And this is how we begin to cultivate equanimity, this balance and inner peace that really allows us to face life's ups and downs. We just kind of ride the waves. And over time, we extend this equanimity to our perfectionistic tendencies because we recognize that they're temporary states rather than truths about who we are that we have to obey. From a Buddhist perspective, again, perfectionism is a form of suffering. It's the source of suffering rooted in clinging, craving, and attachment to ourselves. If we recognize the impermanence of all things, we let go of the illusion of control, we cultivate our mindfulness and compassion, we begin to free ourselves from the grip of perfectionism. So instead of striving for this impossible ideal, we embrace the beauty of imperfection. We find joy in the journey rather than the destination. Some time ago, Tim reminded us of the already broken teacup. We talked about wabi-sabi, the Japanese notion of the beauty in the repaired cup. I love that metaphor. I come back to it often just to remind me that there is beauty in everything, even things that have been or are broken. Nature is not perfect. If we really look at it and see it, it's not perfect. In the end, our freedom lies not in being perfect, but in being present with whatever's coming up, even flaws. When we let go of the need to be flawless, we open ourselves to the richness of life as it is. And you know this, it's messy, it's unpredictable, it's often broken, and it's all deeply interconnected. But in that openness, in that shift to that openness perspective, we discover a profound sense of peace and freedom that is way beyond anything perfection could ever offer, even if we were able to achieve it. So those are some thoughts this morning on perfectionism through a Buddhist lens.